So we know a lot about types. Let's go over some arithmetic operations. We'll cover more expressions later because this is what we're creating, expressions. So we can just take a look at an example here. We assign an integer this variable x, y, and z. We give it some default values there. And we're going to be outputting the values to the console. And then I'm going to show you different operations that you can perform. If you're used to programming, then this isn't going to come as a surprise to you. If you're working with Java or even C or C++, all of these are just working very similarly. And also, even if you're coming from Flash and ActionScript or Visual Basic, it's going to be very, very similar for you. Visual Basic has some additional things here that we're adding to. First thing we're looking at is a unary operation, where we want to increment this value here. So we're putting two plus signs there. And what that does is that increments the value by 1. You can also decrement with two minus signs. And this gives you the ability to just add quickly without having to do the normal binary operation, which is x plus y, or 1 plus x plus 1, if you wanted to do it, to add 1 to this particular value here, x equals x plus 1, something like that. So binary and unary are two different ways to do that. Very simple stuff. You can also do it together within another expression, where this is going to actually add these values, but it's also going to increment the z. So let's take a peek at that and see what it's actually doing. At first, we're just adding 1 to x, we're subtracting 1 from y, and then we're going to output the values here. And you can just look at one console right line before, and then look at one after to see what it's doing. So we'll just close that, and then we can take a peek with this open at the same time, which works out pretty nicely. So what we have here on line 4, after we just do an x plus y, you see we have x is 1, y is 1, z is 2. So then we perform this z plus plus in parentheses, and then we have plus y. So x is going to equal z plus y, but we're also going to increment z by 1. And this is going to happen after the expression is done. So we're going to have z plus y, which is 2 plus 1, which is going to equal 3. X is going to equal 3, and then z is going to be incremented by 1. So you can see that happening here. Z is now 3, used to be 2. And then it's not 1 plus 3, which would be 4, it's 1 plus 2, which is 3. So z plus plus happens after our expression. So this depends on the ordering of how you work. When you put parentheses around something, that's going to take precedence over the outside operations that you're going to be performing. And if you know anything about programming or a little bit about programming, you know multiplication and division are going to take process over actually addition and subtraction. This works just like your algebra. Anything with math and algebra works very similarly. We'll look at expressions later on as well. We're just going over how to do arithmetic for the most part. You can also put all your statements on one line if you wanted to, separated by semicolons. Works just the same there. They're all handled separately. And here is an example of the parentheses around the multiplication, and then we have an addition afterwards. So we multiply y times 2 first, and then we add 1 to it. Pretty easy. And we also have the modulus, or mod, as you can call it, whatever you want to call it. And this is actually taking this value, 20, and it's not dividing by 3, but it's finding the remainder after the division. So if this was 20 divided by 3, then you would have a remainder, and this is outputting the remainder. So we can just look at what happens there on line 8. So why we're getting 2? That's because we can fit 6 times 3 is 18, and then that's an integer value. The remainder is going to be 2. So it doesn't do the decimal point, it does it in the form of integers. So 6 times 3 would fit into that 20 as 18, and then whatever's left over after that is going to be the mod. And what that means is that it's just putting in 3 as many times as it can, and just returning the remainder, whatever whole number remainder is going to occur there. And it comes in handy to do that. Very handy. So I use it quite a lot. And then you have your division. If you divide an integer by a number greater than that number, you'll see that we're just going to get a 0 value here. because we're dealing with integers. You might have to use another data type if you want to work with your decimal places and so forth, and bigger numbers if you want to go outside of the scope of that particular data type. And then if we do a division, 20 divided by 3, we're going to get the value of 6, and you can see that that 2 remainder is going to disappear. Whatever the division is, 6 goes into 20 3 times, 3 goes into 26 times, and there is a remainder. The remainder is dropped off, but we deal in terms of whole numbers for integers. So just some good integer math on how to do this on the basic level. Pretty simple. We're going to explore expressions, and we're going to be using a lot of different things throughout the examples that we're going to be using as we move forward.